guest is Karen, and Karen is working currently at Mozilla. Her previous background is in investment banking, and Karen just started working at Mozilla, and I'm happy that you could join us.
Morning, everyone. Very, very excited to be here. Thank you, Zarina, for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Why don't you briefly introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
So as Zarina mentioned, I am a product manager at Mozilla, specifically with the Firefox desktop platform product team. So what that means is you have an internet browser, and a web browser in front of you, and sometimes you'll use Firefox, sometimes you use Chrome. If you're on the platform team, you go under the hood. And so you go through more of the technical goo that's running all the magic in front of you. It's more of the hidden stuff, the hidden magic that's happening behind the scenes. But it's very, very exciting because that's where you can go into the nitty gritty, especially when it comes to the technical side and working with engineers specifically, which is one of my favorite parts. And also working with partners, thinking how we can work extensively that way too. So it's very deeply rooted on the platform side. And just to give you a little bit more context as to how I broke in, I was an investment banker at Citi Group, and I was in the public finance space. So instead of the typical M&As that you'll see with more of the corporate side investment banking, I was on the government or local municipality side. So if any infrastructure project your tax paying dollars went towards, we try to help facilitate that on the finance side.
Mhm. And how did it happen that were thinking you were working in investment banking, and then why did you decide to go to the product management?
For sure. So I think this was about 2 years ago. And I want to say that I learned so many amazing skills at Citi, especially when it came to presentation and talking to people. Honestly, the client facing part of the job was my absolute favorite. I think meeting people, and people who weren't haughty or people who weren't arrogant. These were people who help run our daily lives, and they have their interests and their routines, and just to get to know them on that kind of level was really nice. After a certain point, though, I think when it came to the pipeline and working through deliverables, I started to get very, very, very burnt out. I think there are the stereotypes that come with investment banking, and there is an occupational hazard that banks are actively trying to work on now. But I think for me, it got a bit much, and there are times when I realized that I wanted to move towards something else. And at that time, I was living in San Francisco. I had made a bunch of friends who happened to be video game developers. Now, that's not directly product related, but at the same time, it is. It is a microcosm of product management. They would tell me about their challenges on a note name basis, of course. And they would say, I have to get this engineer on my side, or this designer is giving me pushback, and I need to figure out what to do. And I thought about that, and when they told me, and that was really something I wanted to take on. I wanted those challenges for myself. So boom, thought about it a little bit more, went to product school, tried to educate myself more on the lingo before I started actively applying to things. And boom, pandemic happened, a lot of introspection. And for me, I think that was the opportunity because I wasn't at an office. I had the privilege of working remotely from home. So I did a lot of networking on LinkedIn and having coffee chats. I'm pretty sure I had coffee chats with over 75 people
Wow.
going from the summer into the fall of 2020. But it was also a great time for me to start getting my hands dirty with actual projects. So first of all, it started with one product community after product school. It was Product Buds, which exploded over the summer. It was fantastic. And working with the team there and getting into the groove of how a product works. It was more of a case study in that sense. It was how we can design Spotify for the deaf and hard of hearing community, how we can optimize the experience and make it more inclusive. And so going into the steps through that, having a mentor, and then jumping into what we'll talk about next, side project, that was the game changer for me. And that really helped me figure out that I love product management. I'm utterly in love with this discipline. It's more than just a career, it's a lifelong craft that you need to build. Everything, even looking at my bathroom door, if this bathroom door gives me issues, I have to figure out the why, and is it worth it to optimize and find a workaround? So even small things like that. I think one product manager I met who's based in London made me think about it in this way. What makes you mad, sad, or glad in these daily routines of yours? And if you're glad, great. It's optimized to however you want it. No need to fix it right now. Don't fix what ain't broke. And and then what makes you sad? Okay, it's a bit of a problem, but what makes you mad? What makes you actively want to change it? That's when you want to start on thinking of those problems there, and then eventually a solution once you prioritize through that.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you. So just to summarize it, you started going to the school. So the product school was the first step. The second step was the product buds, another project kind of like oriented for product managers to gain experience. And then it was a side project. And you say that side project was a game changing experience. Game changing?
Absolutely. Yep.
Am I saying it right? Okay. And I'm pretty familiar with the side project because the founder is a friend of mine. Can you tell me more about side project? I know what it is, but I'm sure that a lot of people would be super interested to learn about it. And I think it's a great project to join.
Absolutely. So Side Project is a community where, and I think this really appealed to me because I was almost 5 years at Citi trying to break into product in an industry where the associate PM programs, the APM programs, are more geared towards university students or fresh graduates, at least within a year. So I think it was really welcoming to me. And the founder, Polina Marchenko, is an amazing person, wonderful visionary. And she's the one who pushes for the belief that people can join into product even if you're in a different discipline. In fact, you can leverage the experiences that you've brought up from your non-PM experiences into a product development team, and that will add value in itself. So I think her program specifically focuses on these types of people like me who wanted to break in after a little bit of time in full time. And I think it's honestly, it started off as a platform, a Slack platform that where people, it was almost like a marketplace where people could find engineers or designers or other product managers to solve an idea or solve a problem first and build on an idea that they had at the very top of their heads and see where it went. After that, Polina founded the Accelerator program, which I was a part of as the second cohort. That is where we're put into teams. It's almost like an incubator experience where you're going through the motions with a lot of mentor support. Some of my favorite product managers I found through this program as mentors, and they would help guide us along the way. It was, as an accelerator program, it was 12 weeks. And so it was a bit of a crash course getting from ideation to an MVP to demo day. And I think with my particular cohort, it was the first time when we were going to show an actual demo. So that was very exciting. I got to work extensively with 2 designers on my team, and we were all fresh out of product school, or I think it was Flatiron for them. And then we had an engineer, I think week 6 on, and just working together and trying to make something out of essentially nothing based on a problem prompt was very, very exciting. There were some guidelines. At the same time, it was do it yourself, I think, which is kind of the push we needed in order to sink or swim.
So when you were interviewing for the position as a product manager at companies, how did Side Project help you to, at interviews?
I would say that the environment of being rather rushed and being on a timeline and setting deadlines for ourselves, that really helped because it put us in a pressure cooker as a team. And being in that kind of environment and going through the motions of learning how to prioritize and get to shipping as a PM really gave me the examples I needed to talk about more qualitative behavioral parts of the interview. So for example, and I'll mention this a little bit more in detail later, when they would ask, tell me about a time you apologized to your team, or what do you think makes a good design collaboration? Being in this very intensive environment really gave me real-time examples of where I had to act in a certain way, or I had to apologize, I had to take accountability for my own actions with actual people on an actual project. So that real-time, real life experience really cemented, or I wouldn't say cemented, I think it really helped me explain why I'm a good fit for product, because I was already in it. My hands were already deep into a project
Mm-hmm.
when this was happening.
Mm-hmm. So basically, you could talk about real life experiences that you had faced at Side Project in
Mhm.
your interviews, and just because you didn't have any product management background, that was really helpful, right?
Exactly.
Why have you chosen Mozilla? I'm sure that
Um,
you were interviewing at other companies, and but why did you choose Mozilla?
this is going to sound cliche, but it's 100% true for me. It was the people mostly. Yeah, I think it was 90% or it was no, that's unfair. 70% the people, 30% the culture, but I think people build culture, so they're very intertwined. So I'll say this at breaking into PM, and I can talk about this more later too. People made me fall in love with product. People helped me learn about product, and people helped me get into product. That expedited my 1.5 years of recruitment. So in that, I mentioned 2 years ago was when I really wanted to think about something new and think about the next step.
Mm.
It was, and then that half a year I just spent learning. I wasn't actively recruiting. And
Mm.
so yeah, going into it a little deeper, I did a lot of networking, as I mentioned earlier, and I reached out to people who eventually became product mentors along the way and helped me because I um I was so curious about what they did, and I wanted to take what they were teaching with me and apply it so that I could come back to them and say, "Hey, I grew from what you taught me. Here are a few modifications, or here's what worked really well." And so building that kind of connection with product people in particular led me to the person who's now my boss's boss. He was a fantastic coach. He's such an inspiring person. He's honestly in my top 3 product leaders in the industry. And
Did you meet him on LinkedIn coffee chat, or how did you meet him?
I met him through a warmer connection. My first product mentor ever, Michelle Priest. I'm gonna mention her later. Yeah, I'll mention her in a little bit. But she was in his coaching cohort of already the pre-existing product managers at the time. And when I had showed that I could add value to a client through just even a product consulting role, that like opportunity that she gave me, she said, "Hey, you got to meet this person." So I met up with him, and then we ended up building a relationship. And he had a community platform of his own, and I wanted to get to know people who are also aspiring product managers or current ones. So I would engage a lot in the community and try to bring more people into the community because it was so useful and it was so helpful. And I think my main goal as a PM now, in addition to helping my company and fighting for the user no matter what, is on the other side to help take away some obstacles from the path into PM for people who want to break in from different careers. I think that I'm trying to give
Mm-hmm.
some guidance here so that they don't have to encounter the same pitfalls that I went on the road. So that's a huge thing for me. And
Mm-hmm.
but going back to Mikal, he is leading the product organization, and he just had amazing ideas. I think along the same lines of Polina, he strongly believes in the fact that you can add a lot of value even if you didn't come from some kind of product centered curriculum at university, or if your recruit, or if your whole life or career path was dedicated towards product, you have a lot to offer from a different field. So that really that really attracted me to his mission. And I think he flagged the position over to me, or he sent it over to me. He said, "Hey, you should think about applying to Mozilla. We're starting to hire and expand our product teams." And I was like, "That's insane. That's so cool." And I think especially why Mozilla, I started out in the nonprofit field before breaking into finance. That was my goal. I think there are a deep part of me is in trying to help with help raising voices that aren't usually heard. And so that started in the nonprofit space. And I think to tie up all of my experience together into a wonderful package and trying to actually find technical solutions is magic almost. So, and the cause for a healthier internet, I am a strong believer of that. The mission is there. And what's fascinating with Mozilla is that they have the Mozilla manifesto. They have their principles here and how they operate. Not one specific product, not even Firefox, is mentioned in these, which is insane, because usually you find that in the product, the core product and the mission statement, but it has to do with the people at Mozilla, and that's the culture that you can't separate the two there, and that's what I really love about it. Also, and I got more of this through the interviews, which we can talk about in more detail shortly, but the people and having conversations with these people I never met before, and having it not be a really clinical, like we literally have a glass screen in front of us, but feeling like we could transcend through the screen and actually have a talk as human beings really made it fun for me. I think that's what really inspired me and made me cement my choice in Mozilla. I think working with people who share the same beliefs, share the same values, and are vocal about it and can have these conversations internally. And I think we're seeing more of that becoming a priority now, especially among tech companies. I think it's just a wonderful, empowering role and company to go into.
Mm-hmm. And that's amazing, because a lot of people are targeting to FAANG companies, right? Because they're so popular, like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix. And other companies such as Mozilla, like people don't know because it's not advertised anywhere. Like, hey, come work for Mozilla, we're amazing,
Mm-hmm.
like other companies do. And for you to see that value in people, I think it's amazing. And for our viewers, if you are just focusing on some like big tech companies like in FAANG,
Mm-hmm.
just consider something else, because there's a lot more that is out there.
I would say if FAANG, I think they added Microsoft FAANG MG. I think if that is the dream company, go for it. But also, yeah, give other companies a chance, because I mean, in terms of tech in our careers, I think was the average number of years we stay in this particular role is 2, 3. I think at Mozilla, it's insane, because I've spoken with people who've been there, for engineers and designers and research people who've been there for, I would say, over 15 to 20 plus years. And that's crazy. That's I asked them why and what compels them to stay. And it's because they love it so much.
And since we're talking about your new position, let's talk about your interview process. Can you describe your interview process?
Sure. So the first round, of course, was the screening with HR, and then it was with Mikhail, the one who sent the position over to me. He was the hiring manager at the time, and then it's what we call in finance the super day. It's the back-to-back interviews. Mine was scheduled so that it was 3 interviews across 2 days each, and so I had 6 people, and they were back to back, but they were 30-minute calls. It was honestly, I am, oh God, I promise you, I'm not, I promise you, I'm not selling this for Mozilla. I'm saying this genuinely for my experience as an interviewee. It was one of the best interview experiences that I've ever had. Going into the idea that it was more of a conversation than an actual just talking back and forth without having anything in between. Another thing that I would highly commend the HR people at Mozilla for is that they're tremendously transparent. Mikhail and my HR representative, they were both communicating with me, and they told me early on it was going to be a more drawn out process. I think it was over the course of 3 months total for recruitment, but I mean, it was also during the holidays, which makes it tougher. But yeah, I think they kept me abreast of all the developments going through and letting me know how things were going, and asking me to give them feedback too through the whole process. So that really helped. Going into the super day though, that was when I was interviewing with people who were program managers, engineers, research people, and they all had different categories. So one, for example, was technical acumen, another was strategy or business strategy and insights and things like that. So they all represented different facets of the PM role, and they all had a rotational set of questions. And so going into that a little bit deeply, there were three types of questions that they would ask me. One was the general, so what do you think constitutes a good design partnership from the product standpoint? Second one was the typical case study. It's, we want to design a weather widget or weather app on the browser. Walk us through your process. And that was a little bit intimidating because I was talking to one of the foremost engineers in the organization. He's very sweet. It wasn't as intimidating just walking through at that point, because he's a very, very friendly person. He'll actually listen. And especially coming from a non-technical side, it was a relief to hear. It was a relief to go through that. And then the third one was more behavioral. So tell us about a time. It wasn't tell us about a time you failed, which was very interesting. It wasn't the usual. So tell us about a time you apologized to the team. Tell us about a time things like that. Tell us about a time when you you had to make a decision based off very limited information. So things that really made me think. But that's when I brought back my side project examples, and I think luckily I was practicing on some questions before that. So even though these questions, some of these questions I hadn't heard before, I could draw on those experiences very easily. So I think one thing that helped working with my team afterwards was to talk through case studies and just to have almost like a bank of experiences behind, or basically mentally or essentially memorized to use them in these kinds of examples and tie them back in.
That's great. So you said that you don't have a technical background. How did the engineering team,
I thought it was going to be harder than it was, but these people were very understanding. I will commend all of my interviewers for that. They were all very understanding, especially the technical ones, because they knew they were hiring for a non-technical role. But the fact that they would actively listen and hear from my ideas. And then I think there was one where one of my interviewers was writing down all my messages, but then I could see his eyebrow come up and then he started nodding. I was like, oh, am I getting somewhere? And so I was asking questions about that. And what was the third thing? The third thing, I think it was breaking out product so that into more tech lingo. So I think for investment, and I was talking to one of my interviewers is an engineer who's been at Mozilla in what they could call glory days back in the day, but they're like, it's debatable. But I think that he is, I tried to explain my job to him because he asked me, and I said, okay, so we have a mainly B2B focus with a B2C offset. What I mean by that is that in investment banking, our main clients, the ones we face most of all, are local governments and municipalities, the people trying to raise money through authorized tax-paying dollars to build certain projects to help benefit the customer. So the customer are us taxpayers in the end. So that is the B2C offset component. So I tried to explain it in those terms, and he said, and it made it a lot more understandable for someone who doesn't have any clue about investment banking. I think when you can explain things like that, and it's going back to that whole UN example, you're putting on a different hat and you're trying to translate into things that are more understandable to the other party.
And what was the most difficult question that you have been asked, and how did you answer?
I think the limited information. Tell me about a time when you had to make a decision based off of limited information. I had a side project case study for or I had an example from my side project experience that I used, but it was hard to think about because I think we want to be as informed as possible, right? So
Mhm.
it's very when you're on a time budget and you're also trying to get things through and you don't want to cause bottlenecks in different cross-functional teams in development, it's really hard to move forward with limited information. And so I had to be honest with myself and with the interviewer to answer that. And I think always had to, well, for that one, and I might have been wrong at the time, who knows? It was just based on my personal experience. I think always focusing on what the user said. And I mean, there some assumptions and going off on assumptions that we had to constantly test. It's constant need for user validation to make things go forward. And if we had to take a step back, I just as a product manager, I had to make sure that the rest of the assumptions were pushing us forward, even if one assumption that was being refuted in the validation or testing process brought us one step back. So
Mhm.
5 steps forward, 1 step back. That was a tough one though to think about. I had to take a moment to digest it when they asked me. There was another one. It was and it was industry, also just design thinking. So one of them was why why did Apple decide to keep their iOS under wraps? Like compared to before when they were sharing stuff freely, why did it become that? So that's interesting question to have from an industry strategic standpoint. So, and then another one that I was really excited about was go into the design philosophy of a water bottle. That was that made me really excited, actually. That's a really fun question to think about. So I'm really I'm if you have any guesses, I would love to share notes with you, like in Zarina's comments, because there are so many ways to go about that.
Yeah, I've read somewhere that a person was describing how the design thinking behind the toilet.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of different things there.
What are your responsibilities at Mozilla right now?
So we're still in the middle of onboarding. I would say that we're doing a guinea pig program because of Mikhail's a revolutionary, and it's just a awesome, awesome future to see where the product team is headed under his leadership. So responsibilities right now is very much active listening and just making the rounds. I don't know if folks here have heard of the 30, 60, 90 tour. That I'll in my reading recommendations, I'll mention it because that's when you have your plan and I go over it extensively with my manager on a monthly basis. So in the first 90 days, you want to make an impression of the company. So I'm actively working on that right now, in addition to the deliverables that have been assigned to me. So I've been assigned to do, the market research and going through the motions, do the market competitive analysis, thinking about strategic insights, living in the product to figure out what needs what kind of gap is there to get to where we need to be as a more modern product. So that was, I think it's a lot of learning right now. It's a lot of learning. It's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of setting targets and trying to almost like OKRs in a sense, objective key results, but just trying to get there from a position standpoint, from a role standpoint, if that makes any sense.
And how many people in your team right now?
There are, let's see, 4 of us, including me, with my manager, and then there are different. So that's the platform group specifically, though.
And it's 4 of the product managers.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we work with engineering teams, but there there are engineers are, I think, assigned to particular lines of product in the company. So we get to chat with them, and they're all super nice. I get to shadow in on calls, which is really fun. I get to listen to all the development and see people's faces and see them walk through this, and they're fine with me sitting in there. That's what I was afraid of, because they probably would have thought like, who's this outsider? But no, not at all. It is contrary to that. They're very friendly and they're excited, and I think seeing their enthusiasm, I think, for new ideas and also through the challenges is really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk about the tools that you guys are using in your team, and you think that it's essential for every product manager to know and to learn?
if you're an aspiring product manager, I would say familiarize yourself with, I think for me, well, from my personal experience, it was Miro and Notion. So Notion is what I actually used for my interview space, my interviewing I was talking about, because I in building my Notion page for myself, and it's very easy. It's non-technical, so very intuitive, especially if you know Google Docs. If you know how to use that, it's very easy to get a hold of Notion. And so that was where I was explaining why my role fits in as an investment banker going into product. So Notion is a good tool to start building products on, if especially on your if you're on a shoestring, working off a shoestring budget. It's a very limited budget. You're trying to just get a product out there. Notion is a very good way to get started on that, for as an MVP too, because it's visually appealing and minimalist. Another thing is Miro. So I love Miro. I will sing Miro's praises to the skies. They don't pay me to say this. It is a virtual playground for your teammates. It's a mental playground. I build my models there. I love the post-its, of course, but all the mental models I build out on there, and that's what I share with the team. And the asynchronous aspect is really helpful, especially because I might be working in a different time zone than a teammate who might be working in Berlin. So I think Miro has been fantastic. In Side Project, Miro was essential for us sharing wireframes and assumption, like how we documented our assumptions and which ones made it to the next stage, which ones didn't. So Miro's absolutely fantastic. They also have a robust user community, so I would recommend checking out the Miro user groups. It's almost like which stack will you use, which language will you use for tech or in engineering. I mean, really depends. And sometimes, and especially if you're non-technical like me, you'll learn a lot of it on the job. I mean, I didn't know how to use Jira, and we use Jira. And things like that. We also have our own proprietary stuff. Well, it's not people use Bugzilla publicly, so that's okay for me to mention. So Bugzilla is a way to report bugs and get sometimes get a hold of engineers on an issue working within. And then we use Slack, of course. If you use Slack already, you're fine there. But I think a lot of the other tools are things that I just am learning on the job. Honestly, you learn a lot. If you're breaking in, you learn a lot of stuff on the job. I think what they try to screen you for is, well, first of all, it's really important to find someone who's willing to take a chance on you. That's what expedited my whole process. And secondly, they're looking for someone who checks the boxes of at least the qualitative side of if you have the potential to be a product manager at who's a good fit at the organization because you've demonstrated X amount of skill, X number of skills, specific skills. But it's not how much Jira do you know? Can you operate it comfortably right off the bat? No, you'll learn that, and people will be very patient, especially in your first 90 days.
Can you talk about the challenges that you have faced while you were interviewing, and about the challenges that you're facing right now at your position?
I think the interviewing, because for me, I am an overstudier when it comes to interviewing. I'd rather have that information. So it wasn't a matter of that. I think it was the nerves. I think it was, and I could talk about imposter syndrome for days, but it was the imposter syndrome kicking in and just, am I ready to do this, first of all, or am I worthy of going into it? And it was more of a mental challenge for me going into the interviews for sure. But I think that is a workable problem. I think that's more something I can fix gradually, but see results faster, because like it's the kind of internal mental change where you can see faster results on the end side. And then going into challenges as working as a PM at Mozilla, I'm still in the learning space right now. There's a lot of information, but I don't consider it, if it makes sense, it's a positive challenge. It's not daunting. It's more of, oh my God, like it's like the song, A Whole New World. It's like that, and just being excited about all the information that lies underneath. But I think having a team that's so willing to be patient, especially with the non-technical side, is really helpful, and really, and they're support, not only patient, they're supportive. They're
Mhm.
also supportive. So I think that really played a part in how I see it, and I'm really loving my experience so far. And challenge, I guess I can't really, I think I'm still very much in the excited, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed honeymoon phase of being a new PM. And I think working with a team such as mine is really helping that. And so I think it's good challenges right now at Mozilla.
Any advice you can give to aspiring product managers or for people who are trying to transition from one profession to another? Like, how do they start? Where do they start?
I think the one overarching message I want to start off by saying is um, you're going to have to go out of your comfort zone. That's first of all, and that's where imposter syndrome comes in, right? Because you're learning the unknown. You never get imposter syndrome when you're working with something you're comfortable with. You have to learn how to get out of that comfort zone and start embracing yourself out of that comfort zone. And so you're going to have to talk to people. You're going to have to learn a lot of things. At the same time, don't overextend yourself. That is the one message I want to say, because I will admit, when I was juggling investment banking and side project, there were moments of burnout because I was so excited about pushing for something new while maintaining a good reputation at Citi and being the achiever I am, that I want to be consistently, and like delivering on that my job and doing well in that job, as well as doing a good job at side project and doing a good job for my team. I think there were times when I did hit burnout. While I want to help my fellow breaker inners, my fellow disruptors, I think I would really caution on burnout. Listen to yourself, especially when you're outside of the comfort zone. Listen to yourself. If you're feeling overextended, it might be time to take a little bit of a break and figure out which thing needs prioritizing. But that's just the disclaimer there. It's a very fulfilling experience. Looking back, while there are some things I would have tweaked for myself, especially when it came to the factors that led up to burnout, I would say that I would never trade up the people I met, the connections I built, the projects that I worked on with the team, and the teammates I have helped, or I have worked with, not even helped, I've worked with and have been inspired by, for the world. I would never give those up. I would never give those experiences up, because it also made me think of myself, of who I am as a person. It was introspective, as well as just a whole learning curve that I could gladly scale up. So I would
Mhm.
not, yeah, I would not sacrifice that for the world. So I'll let for the step-by-step practice. I mean, for me, read the books, first of all, read the books. You can feel free to check out, like, learn on Product School or Udemy or which one, just get a basic sense of the product
Do you recommend to go to the
process.
product school before you start, doing the side project or even applying to RPM positions, for example?
I think for me at the time, I had the means to get it's expensive. Product school is expensive. Courses are expensive. And I'll admit to that. But at the same time, I didn't have the time to curate my own development. There are people who do that, and I am very inspired by them, because that's a lot of resourcefulness right there. But I think for me, I had the means, and I didn't have the time. So I opted to get product school because I wanted to learn. And they had,
Mhm.
like, their product school book was a fantastic way to look into product management from an introductory standpoint. And that was very useful. And building my own first case study was really a marvelous way to kick it off. But I would say, first of all, read the books. Second, read the people. You want to, I learned the most about product through people, but having the foundation of understanding the product process by reading the books and reading this, like, embracing all these articles, whether it was or articles and LinkedIn. So LinkedIn posts, product people on Twitter, um, Medium is an amazing resource for product, especially. So I fell down the Medium rabbit hole a lot of times, and it was very useful for me. So when you do that level of homework and you start reading the people, you're not forcing them to walk you through the very elementary parts of product because you did your homework. And that's really important. You want to make these people's lives easier too, right? So you want to really get to know them, get to know what kind of problems inspire them, because who knows, you might find a problem from them that inspires you as well. And that's when you want to start building. So read the books, read the people, start building. You just want to, that's what happened with Side Project. I think that's where I could really get my firsthand product experience. And that's why you see a lot of founder product manager turnover or role switching a lot of times, because they in both experiences you see the pitfalls of having to deliver something on a scale, and then we're seeing more of a move towards the agile. It doesn't have to be strictly agile, but the more the iterative development cycles. So seeing that happening and working off of that, you'll see a lot of founders and PMs working together or transferring into each other's fields. So building something gives you that wherewithal and the know-how to explain, not only in interviews, but also in your team experiences. That helps you show that you have a dedicated pursuit of product, no matter what.
What about like connecting with people, like coffee chats and stuff like that?
So yeah, I think coffee chats, that's with reading with the people. I think okay, Zarina, do you know how many people send me personalized LinkedIn requests?
No.
So it used to be 1 in 10. 1 in 10 people would send me personalized LinkedIn requests. I guess that was my bias, because my LinkedIn feed shows people talking about it all the time. Personalize your LinkedIn connection requests. Rarely happens. I think only recently did that proportion get bumped up to a fifth, 2 tens. And I think that really shocks me, because you always personalize LinkedIn requests. That's one thing to everyone out here. I want to say, don't spray and pray when it comes to connections. By spray and pray, I mean, don't just keep on sending like hundreds and hundreds of blank requests. You want to make a connection, especially to people who are higher up. And you might even have people who are you're doing a reach connection towards, because you may not be there might be a very or almost cold connection, even with secondary connections that you might not know in particular. So it's harder to do that. And it is getting out of the comfort zone, because you're reaching out to these people. But when you personalize, do your homework. So it's really, their LinkedIn profiles are oftentimes have content there. They sometimes write about things on LinkedIn, or they post about their TED Talks, or they post about any interviews that they have on YouTube, or they have their own website, or their own books, or their own articles. There's such a wealth of information out there. And this is why I love product too. It's almost like a professional book club to me. There's so much resource sharing happening behind the scenes. So they're there to provide resources, and a lot of times it's out there already. So read it and then go back to them.
And when you go back to them, what do you tell them? Like, hey, I've read your book and I think this is an amazing, but I think this needs to be improved, or like, how do you reach out to them so that you start the conversation actually?
That's actually how I met my first product mentor, Michelle Priest. I read her article series. It was a 5-day crash course in the product cycle and building a product in 5 days challenge. And that was mind-boggling to me, because I never thought about that before. And she has all these literary resources. And so I reached out to her on LinkedIn. I don't think we had any mutual connections at the time, but I reached out and said, I really loved your article. This particular art subset and the article really sang to me. And the more excited you can be about someone's piece, the more likely you'll get a response. I mean, you're not going to get a response all the time, and that's fine. That's life. But like, sometimes if you want to show that you're a fan, show that there are some things out there. And even if and then you can also, if there's something that you disagree with, explain why, but also say that there's something you really admire. Don't be a contrarian. You also want to show that you're a fan, and like you want to take it to the next step by saying, I took this lesson you gave me through your article or video to heart, and I approached it this way, and this is what I learned. And so this is like, maybe it needs some slight modifications. Don't frame it like that. Frame it in a more professional, like courteous way. But I would say that you come back to them and then they can grow as people too. You can add value. I think every conversation I had with a person who was already in tech was, how can I add value given that I'm so new and I'm non-technical? There are different ways to think about it. And I think adding value is showing that you're reading, and you're also, and especially when you write about what you've read by them, you're adding more traffic to their sites. So you can think about in marketing analytics terms too. If you're connecting, or if you're tagging them in your posts, or you're commenting on saying this book really was revolutionary, this is what, here's some key things that I learned and I approach in my daily life, that brings people to their channel. So more viewers.
Win-win.
Exactly, it's win-win. And one thing that another mentor, I would call her in an informal way, I think she fantastic human being. It's really nice to see, especially an Asian American woman in tech and higher up in product. She told me something that I'll never forget. It's, the best product leaders have a bias towards growth. So that means they're going to be entrenched in masters of their product world. At the same time, though, they know that way. They know a particular way, and that's not a dig on them. That's just how we all are. Once we get used to something, we become we understand a lot of that, what we're working with. We have our own understanding, and then sometimes someone comes in with a fresh perspective, and there are other ideas to amplify what we're thinking and move us all forward. So those product leaders are the ones who listen to ideas and are excited by new ideas too, and they're willing to listen to people who don't have a tech background, who are offering this perspective in, I would say, in an informed way. I would say just don't go in blind. You want to, or sorry, excuse me. Sorry, that's not inclusive. So the best product leaders will support these inspired, informed ideas from people who don't come in from these backgrounds. And they'll listen. And so that's what really helped me get past the barrier of thinking, oh, it's such a structure that's very very closed. It's not. Product is not a closed culture. It's very open. At least it should be. There might be some gatekeepers out there who might say contrary to that, but I personally believe that the best product leaders have a bias towards growth, no matter where it comes from.
So our last part is when our guests are sharing something in the value with our viewers. And Karen, what can you share with us?
So I'm going to give Zarina a reading list, and just a list of people who really shaped my understanding of product over time. They're wonderful content creators. I think they really inspire me every day, because here's the thing, tech is not a static field at all. We're constantly going to be learning new things. And if there are certain goods and evils that come from the products that we're using daily now, it's on the next generation to make things better with those goods and evils that we have facing. Like, we are helping drive the future, and the next set of products in the next generation will answer the goods and evils that we created now with what we have.
I wanted to thank you so much for joining today with me and talking about your experiences. I think it's, first of all, congrats on the new position, and I'm excited for you. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences. This is really valuable.
Thank you so much for having me, Zarina, and have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. Thank you for listening in.